Question of the market access of a medical device. You know that I have foreseen in my text a centralized and a decentralized market authorization procedure that is in line with some of my colleagues who support that, others do not. We now have to see what compromise can we find, as well together with the Commission, to make sure that patient safety is the highest impact and that only medical devices get on the market which are safe and which are prudently looked at. You know that on medical devices, not only clinical data are more difficult to get, but as well the traceability and long-term studies are more difficult because the device very often is implanted, so we have to be there very prudent. We look at, and I looked at that as well, to make a distinction in medical devices which are, let's say, innovative or which are in class 3. Some of my colleagues even include class 2B, devices which stay in the body. So we will have to look at that, Mr. President, and I hope that we find a compromise. I'm not sure at the moment, because we have everything from even sharpening my line in different political groups, and we have everything from keeping the system as it is at the moment. But I'm optimistic that we at least make a very hard try to get an agreement, as well together with the Commission there in that part. Two items where I want to refer to is reprocessing. There we have as well 25 amendments on pages 50 till 63, which is a significant problem as well. The Commission has foreseen that everything which is reprocessed, the reprocessor is treated as a manufacturer and takes over the liability. That does not leave room, and that does not explain why still we have single-use products which are labeled as single-use, but where everybody obviously finds it totally normal that they are reprocessed. There we have to make a distinction. Is single-use really single-use? And if not, why is it labeled then single-use? With my amendments, as I told you last time already, I tried to strengthen that and try to bring a little bit of clarity into that jungle by increasing the obligation for the manufacturer to define why it is single-use, and at the same time not allowing single use as long as it is not proven that it is safely possible, and then that has to be done and authorized by the Standing Committee in the Commission, and then the producer and manufacturer is not allowed to label it single use any longer. We have different parts and different amendments from not only the one shadow, but as well many amendments from others as well, going into all directions. And then finally, we have the whole area of the notified bodies. There as well we have different attitudes. We agree today, and I think that is at least the line we can find a common line, that notified bodies should be looked at a little bit with a little bit more caution. Not necessarily my approach all over the place. So we have still to be a little flexible and finding compromises there, which I'm deeply convinced we could. My ideal world still would be that if there is no centralized or decentralized authorization, which I hope we get, but if we do not get it, and if we do not all agree on it, we really would have to strengthen the quality of notified bodies, and I insist that whoever is a notified body has to have in-house staff, means in-house medical doctor, in-house pharmacologist, in-house medical engineers. The scrutiny mechanism is important for many of us. Many of my colleagues tabled amendments on the scrutiny mechanism as well on notified bodies. I deeply hope that we can find compromises. It means compromise amongst all of us. I am prepared to do that in good faith, but I have to say at the same time, we have an obligation to improve patient safety. We have an obligation which not only medical doctors oblige us to, but as well patient organizations expect us to, and that gives, at least on the question of the evaluation, the amount of clinical data necessary, the amount of clinical trials on that necessary, the mechanism of the market access of what quality ever that is. There, the room for compromises is limited, so we have to see that we go good together. I know, and I discussed that with the Commission as well, that if we would change the Commission proposal on the market access in some way, we could have the Commission on our side, perhaps not as far as I was prepared to go, but perhaps on a compromise level.
And we are aware of the pressures in terms of wanting to have new products on the marketplace as well. So there is room for compromise. In some areas it will be difficult, perhaps impossible, and then the committee will have to decide. But certainly stepping up the quality of our notified bodies, the staffing of these bodies, the scrutiny, all of these things will be absolutely vital. And I have a real concern too about post-market surveillance.
I think we can find some common ground for a compromise here. If you look at some of the examples you brought up, say in-house experts, some of the suggestions you've made won't be possible, but if we have a specialised notified body that deals with cardiac issues, for example, they will always be able to have an in-house expert. But perhaps there will be this in-house expert may be somewhat disappointed that they're spending the whole time doing a very specific task, and they may lose some of their expertise in other areas. So it may not be realistic. We may also be able to agree with you on issues related to how we deal with products which are already on the market, with surveillance and follow-up. I think we can reach a compromise on this, and I think we could agree that we need more and more rigorous controls, especially for the producers. Now, the issue of centralised and decentralised market authorisation procedure, that's not so clear. We have to try and find arguments for or against this. Issues related to medical devices, these aren't necessarily improved by having a centralised procedure. If we're talking about having a producer who's involved in criminal activity, we're unable to improve this situation if we were just to say, well, for class 3 products, these will be controlled on a centralised level. This will always give rise to a problem. Perhaps the notified body can be more effective here compared to a centralised authority, because the notified body will actually be closer to the ground. We need to try and strengthen the system and improve quality. There are some problems with the usage of the devices, often with the doctors themselves. And very often it's the patient who is not familiar with how the device should be used. Moving on to single-use devices, we have to be sure that somebody who produces a product which is then reused and then reprocessed should always bear the responsibility for what they are doing.
I've just been to Marseille, and that's where this whole PIP trial took place. 7,500 women were there, and they experienced this problem with these breast implants that were manufactured with industrial silicone. And this happened under the existing system. When the Food and Drug Administration in the US was asked for a certification for these PIP breast implants, and they said, no, we will not give any market access authorization to these breast implants. So that means that when we have this FDA, when somebody asks them for a market access authorization, then they say, no, we need to strengthen checks. how are we going to make sure that they detect anything, knowing that all their funding comes from manufacturers? We need a public body to exercise oversight. What we need is to stop fraud, but there's still fraud. We've just seen another case, another implant, using a European Community label. Hospitals just took this device and they used it for patients because they saw this European Community label. So it's the producers, the manufacturers who carry out fraud, and the certifying bodies are not a guarantee against fraud. So I feel that for all implants, anything that we're going to insert into the body, we need a market access authorization. All the victims are asking for market access authorization.
Yes, we have an obligation to patient safety. We also have an obligation to have a system that's going to work, that is not over-bureaucratic and will not stop people getting the care they need. There will be compromises. The interesting thing is where we find the compromises and where we need to cross red lines for each political group. It's a very technical dossier, as has been said, so I think we are well versed to deal with the technical side first and then fight out the political battles amongst ourselves. For myself, there are the usual areas of concern: notified bodies, centralised system, pre-market authorisation, and one-use device. I'm not going to go through them again to save time. But when we talk about fraud, and some of the problems we've envisaged are with fraud, we need to have systems in place that have traceability so we know where these devices are coming from.
Yes, well, I'm from a country that does produce quite a few single-use products, particularly plastic products, tubes, for example, and containers for liquids, for example. And when I talk to the manufacturers and those using these products, well, the reply I receive is that single-use products have been designed for single use. And therefore, it is a problem when they are reused. Because in many cases, it's not possible to guarantee that they are properly cleaned. And therefore, I would prefer banning reuse of single-use products completely. And so I'm very grateful for Madame Lepage's proposal that we should ban such reuse. And I do hope that we can come up with some good common amendments, some compromises, because otherwise, Lord knows what's going to happen during the vote. So good luck. Thank you.
I'm still of the belief that the advantages of a centralised procedure are not sufficient to merit its introduction, and the establishment of such a system would be severely hampered by very real financial and organisational barriers. The European Medicines Agency has no expertise in medical devices.
Not yet as much online with my approach as I would wish to, but that's the reason we need to make compromises. I simply want to make some things very clear. I do not want colleagues to fall into that trap which the producers of medical devices try to pretend. They try to pretend that any other system will prolong the market access longer and patients do not get access. Like one roof organization of producers did in a very moving way, describing that poor lady not getting the urgently needed device. Colleagues, we just always want to speak about the real facts. The Commission proposal we are speaking about results in a procedure and a market access which is roughly 7 months. So with the Commission procedure, I just always have to make sure that I get the numbers right. We have 7 months. The procedure I have foreseen adds additional 2 months, which is nothing, colleagues, honestly nothing. When you see at the same time that those 7 months from the Commission do not necessarily imply the direct market access in most of the member states, they have to start still the negotiations with the social securities, who have to pay for the implants.